The Bitcoin halving is almost upon us. So we are, as of right now, probably less than 24 hours away, or just about 24 hours away from the next halving. So for those of you who don't know what the Bitcoin halving is, in the Bitcoin protocol, it is built in that the new distribution of Bitcoin, so the new supply coming into the market for Bitcoin, i.e., the amount of Bitcoin that can be mined per block, it gets cut in half approximately every 4 years. So right now, if you mine a block of transactions on the Bitcoin network, you get rewarded with 6.25 BTC, which at like almost was it like 65k USD now each for Bitcoin. It's a lot of money, right? Like if you get 6.25 Bitcoin, well, after tomorrow, after the halving event, it's going to get cut into 3.125, right? So it's going to be half of that. So that means that miners will earn less revenue initially, but because there's less Bitcoin that's coming into the market, if the demand stays the same or goes higher and the supply gets cut in half all of a sudden, guess what happens, right? Usually the price goes up. So we've seen this every 4 years, and the halving is what's been attributed to as to the cause of the big, like kind of parabolic, exponential growth that you see in the price of Bitcoin. So if you guys scroll down after the halving countdown clock, the next picture, which I will put up right now, is the stock to flow model. Now, the stock to flow model is developed by this guy named Plan B, who is he used to be I think a commodities analyst. He analyzed like gold and other precious metals and stuff, and he found that Bitcoin actually fit his model a lot better. So anything that has like it measures like the new supply of a commodity coming into the market versus the how much of it is like in existence and circulating already, right? So the stock to flow model kind of is the solid line, and you see those like big steps up. Those are the halving, right? So whenever it takes like a staircase step up, those are the halving, and then the rainbow line is kind of it is the Bitcoin price that has already happened, right? The historic price. So as you can see, when you fit the solid line over the rainbow line tends to track the solid line like pretty decently accurately, right? And then if you look at the y-axis, by the way, it goes up in increments of like 10, so it's what's called a logarithmic scale. So I had a Twitter user like get mad at me for posting something with a logarithmic scale. It's like, oh, you're manipulating the y-axis. It's like, no, this is the logarithmic scale. Like this is something that's used in mathematics all the time. And the reason why we use a logarithmic scale as opposed to a linear scale, which is usually what the graph is for the y-axis, it goes up. Usually it goes up linearly, right? But the reason why we use logarithmic scales is because if you look at the Bitcoin price in linear terms, the chart just looks crazy, right? Like it captures like all the volatility of like recent times, but like the the before when Bitcoin went from like $1 to $10, that'll look tiny, right? So logarithmic scales, it captures kind of the percentage movements a lot better. So that's why for Bitcoin, something that's gone from basically worth nothing to worth over $70,000 at one point, it's a lot better to use log scales. So again, just putting that out there so that people don't get confused. But anyways, back to the chart. If you look at the chart, the stock to flow has predicted kind of the price, I would say relatively accurately. A lot of people don't like the stock to flow for whatever reason, but I tend to actually really like it. And the interesting thing is the next step up after this halving, if we follow the log scale and we follow the stock to flow model, the stock to flow model predicted price where that next plateau is, it's around 440K. So, and that's in US dollars, by the way. So if for us, Canucks up here in the Great White North. That's about I think like over 600,000 Canadian dollars. So anyway, I'm not saying that that's what's going to hit, right? But that is what the stock to flow model predicts. So yeah, here's my question to you guys. Number one, are you guys excited for the halving? That's the most important question of all. Number two, what kind of price impact do you think the halving is going to have? Do you think that the stock to flow model is going to come to fruition, or do you think it's going to be something more tame or something like kind of in between, like what the stock to flow predicts and what the like general peak, what the final peak will be? Or do you think that the stock to flow model is correct? So yeah, take it away.
Bitcoin halving, yeah. I am pretty keen for the Bitcoin halving. I've been looking forward to this for a while, particularly since my mining stocks have been kind of doing a little bit pathetic the last little bit. So my expectations are that the Bitcoin halving will have a positive impact on the price. It'll raise it up substantially. The question of how much, it's difficult to say, because at the end of the day, as much as we can look at the stock to flow graph and be like, oh yeah, it'll be at XYZ dollar amount, we also do have to remember that the money has to come from somewhere. So people have to be willing to purchase it. And there will be and should be some more adoption that comes into the market. And my expectation is that there's going to be more adoption in the market. I can see it petering off maybe lower than the stock to flow, but again, I don't think that it's going to be substantially lower. We've already hit all-time highs in Bitcoin recently before the halving, which hasn't happened in the past. So that's already a good sign for the amount of people who are interested and willing to invest in Bitcoin. So I could see it increasing a fair amount. It's just the number that I'm not 100% certain on, right? Because the stock to flow is a little bit aggressive. It's got it going all the way up to 450,000 USD as the next plateau point, and that is a substantial increase. And I mean, maybe that's possible. I can't see the future, but that would represent a quite substantial 9x on the current value of Bitcoin, which would be suggesting that we have a lot more money going into it. And again, I'm not saying that's impossible, but it's just the amount of money that needs to go into it is a lot. So that being said, I think that pretty much any move to the upside, I think that they will likely happen not at the halving event, but after a while, because the halving event, I feel like, tends to be more of a sell the news kind of scenario, where people tend to sell the halving, and then the prices rebound later when people are rebuying the dip. And then in the past, the parabolic has tended to happen later in the year, or early next year. So that's kind of what I'm expecting it to track, is something more along the lines of that. But again, it's difficult to say what exactly it'll do. But I think that the main thing is that there's going to be more adoption and less Bitcoin for the adopters to buy, right? And I think an important thing that I had to think about with Bitcoin particularly is that with the inflation rate decreasing, the ability to gain additional Bitcoin becomes substantially more difficult, right? Because of the fact that we have less people just generating Bitcoin, therefore there's less Bitcoin in the market. And so, like, in that regard, with less Bitcoin being created, it's now harder for anyone who wants to get into Bitcoin to obtain Bitcoin because they are more likely to have to be convincing someone else to sell their Bitcoin. And to convince someone else to sell their Bitcoin, you have to offer them enough money that they are willing to sell you your Bitcoin. And that's kind of the big problem that I foresee. Not problem, but the good appreciation factor. Because of the fact that there'll be a lot less Bitcoin going into the market, there will just be it'll be a lot harder to obtain Bitcoin. And if there's more adoption, people are having a harder time adopting Bitcoin, but they want to adopt Bitcoin, then there's going to be a pretty sizable price increase. So I think that there will be a substantial increase. Just to TLDR, there will be a substantial increase. I'm not sure if it'll be as high as the stock to flow, but who knows? Hopefully. But I think that there will be a substantial increase, and I'm very excited for it.
So yeah, no, based off what Tristan sort of just said now, it seems pretty promising. So I think the halving works is you're cutting off like the supply. So ultimately there's still demand, and then less supply. I would imagine that the price of Bitcoin will be a lot higher. So like if we're currently owning a specific amount already, that amount will go a lot higher for us too. And in turn, we're going to be making more money. So it's awesome news. But I guess if we're trying to buy some Bitcoin, it might be a little worse for us from my understanding too as well. And then in terms of the stock to flow, if I'm reading this chart correctly, it does seem like it pivots a little up downwards in relation to like the lines. But I think
if you're reading the chart correctly, you're gonna get rich. That's what's happening.
Well, that's what we're hoping for. So I think it seems relatively accurate. Like although there's little like bumps and like down and ups here and there, at the end of the day, it seems pretty accurate. So maybe it will follow through, and hopefully it does, because that's what we literally all want. And yeah, who knows? I feel like there's a lot of potential in Bitcoin. So if you're not actually in it, you're like losing big. So get in while you can, before the price gets a lot higher. So yeah.
Yeah, I had to take off this hat because it was too hot in my room. But
oh yeah, wait, sorry. I noticed that. I'm liking the hat, man. Yeah, sorry.
So this hat, it says Bitcoin 100K. So yeah, basically I bought this hat all the way back in 2021 because I thought that Bitcoin is gonna hit 100K and it never did. So I've just been bag holding this hat this whole time. But I think like it hasn't hit 100K US yet, but I think it did hit 100K Canadian. So I think that makes it okay for me to wear it because it doesn't specify the currency. It's just a dollar sign. Yeah, anyways, to answer my own question from earlier, yeah, I'm like super excited for the halving. I think that it's going to be huge. And it's like, I think CNN even mentioned it, and they said this was like the World Cup of Bitcoin, which is pretty fitting, I think, because the World Cup happens every 4 years as well, right? So, yeah, this is like the biggest event in Bitcoin, and it's just a simple matter of economics, right? So, it's like supply and demand. So, if demand stays the same, or if it's higher, and the supply all of a sudden gets cut in half, then the price has to increase, right? And this is like Bitcoin is different than any other asset where, like for gold, for instance, if the price of gold just doubled overnight for whatever reason, well, then what's going to happen to all the gold miners, right? They're going to ramp up production of gold and they're going to dig for more gold. But with Bitcoin, because this distribution schedule is pre-programmed, you can try to mine harder, but like it's still going to be a block every 10 minutes. And you're still only going to get 900 Bitcoin per day right now. And after tomorrow, you're going to get 450 Bitcoin per day. And that's not going to change. Like no matter how hard you mine, that's all the Bitcoin, right? You can't increase the supply past a certain extent of where it programmed the new supply is going to be. So that's just kind of a matter of just supply and demand on why I think the price is gonna kind of explode after the halving. And uh, I think we're starting to see the miners also becoming correlated with the price of Bitcoin again, as it should, right? So before, I'm sure you guys all know painfully well that for the past like 2 months, it's like if Bitcoin goes up, then miners go down, and if Bitcoin goes down, then miners go down even more, right? And I think that pattern was just completely ridiculous, and it's just the market kind of being irrational, and the market being worried that of course, immediately after the halving, it is going to be the case that it's not going to immediately shoot up, right? So it's not like the halving happens and the price immediately goes to 100 200k, right? So uh, please don't misunderstand what I say, what I said when I said the price is going to go up after the halving. It's not that fast, right? So yes, of course, for a while, it is going to be that the miners are going to have a hit in their revenue. However, I think the fear of that got ahead of what the reality is, and then people sold off the miners just based on that fear. But I think that after the halving happens, that fear kind of subsides, and then you're going to return to this relationship where miners represent a multiple of Bitcoin. So if Bitcoin goes up by 1%, miners goes up by 2 to 3%, right? So I think that's the kind of natural relationship it's going to be. And miners also have to catch up to Bitcoin's performance, just to equal Bitcoin's performance, right? So I'm super bullish on holding Bitcoin miners, and I think that that's going to be we're going to have a great time for the rest of this year, maybe even into early 2025, into the next kind of bull peak. But yeah, what do you guys think? Do you guys have any comments specifically as to the Bitcoin miners, and what do you guys think about that post halving?
My comments is I think the true story for hats is you actually went into the future, time traveled, and got the Bitcoin 100K celebration hat, and you came back in time and you came to this podcast and you came up with this docket and then came up with this episode here. No, I'm just playing. I'm just messing around. That was my only comments. I was being silly.
Just to zoom it back to the Bitcoin miners, I feel like people seem to be missing the point with the Bitcoin miners a lot of the time in the in a lot of comments that I see where people are going, just fight Bitcoin. The miners are dead. Miners are going to zero. Bitcoin good, etc. But they seem to be missing the part where there is no Bitcoin without mining companies. So, or at least miners in general. So if miners don't exist, then Bitcoin goes to zero because there's no Bitcoin. Like, it just doesn't work, right? So I think that perspective is kind of nullifying the value of the Bitcoin miners. And I think a big factor with the miners is that, for me at least, that I think is a major value add for them is the fact that they can be held in registered accounts. And yes, I realize we have ETFs for Bitcoin now, that you can hold in registered accounts and avoid some tax on the gains. But the fact that the miners are both typically tend to be a leverage play on Bitcoin, plus you can hold them in a registered account, means that they represent an area where you can get a substantial amount of gains while keeping your risks, a little bit more minimized. And with that in mind, that's not to say that they aren't risky. Obviously, this is a volatile asset. Bitcoin is, as well as the miners that generate it. It's just that, in my mind, Bitcoin is something that is going to be increasing substantially in value in the future, and the guys who make it are going to be riding that wave just as well. And so the fact that you can get an opportunity to buy them at a discounted rate, or at least currently, is something where we can there's a lot of opportunity for significant growth in my mind, not financial advice. I think this is just in my opinion. Again, very very volatile, and there's a much higher risk. You're not going to be walking into this, not looking at your portfolio for 10 years and being like, oh, this is exactly what I expected to happen, right? You're either gonna, if you do that, you're either gonna be looking at a very large portfolio or a very very small portfolio. And I don't know what it'll be, but I think this is definitely an area where there's a lot of potential value.